Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of the IP3 podcast. I'm Kevin,
And I'm Alex.
and today we're going to talk about Flesh and Blood's Power 9 ofs. Uh, for anybody coming from MTG, you might understand that little insider joke. We'll cover more later when we get to our main topic.
I
Um,
just understood it 30 seconds ago.
Alex does not come from Magic, so that was news to him, but he thinks it's really, really funny. Uh, so, brief jaunt around Fab news. Relatively slow, all things considered. Not anything really happening in the way of events at the moment, but heavy hitter spoilers have started and are looking kind of sweet. We've moved out of expansion slot territory and are now looking at heroes and our first taste of the cards in the set. Um, Unfortunately, we're not going to talk about those today. We will be going over those very in depth in a few episodes a few weeks from now. Um, but for the moment, we're gonna let it sit. We're gonna wait until most, if not all, of the set is spoiled before we start, trying to analyze it and telling you uh, you know, what the next Warmonger's diplomacy is.
Gotta go undefeated at pre-release.
Yep,
But
we'll
probably
know at that point. At that point, we'll know what busted Majestics are gonna get you your 3-0. Spoiler alert, everybody has a weapon, so that's going to be cool.
I think it's only the second set that's true, right? It's Welcome to Wraith. It's the only other set that everybody had a weapon that could like actually attack.
I think
Obviously,
so.
there's weapons.
Right, yeah, obviously every set has
Arcane Rising had a bow. Monarch had Iris of Reality.
Arcane Rising also had Crucible of Aether Waves, so talk
Yeah,
about
yeah.
a fatigable strategy. Um, Monarch, Tails had a bow. Yeah, so this is going to be the first time since Welcome to Wraith that at least likely every hero just has a weapon that doesn't run out of ammunition. It doesn't run out of like at a base level you can just always attack for whatever your base measly weapon ability is. So that sort of will be a very different dynamic from uh, the perpetual threat of fatigue from bright lights. So it'll be a refreshing change.
Can you tell we're excited because we just told you that we weren't going to talk about it, and then we started talking about it.
True story. True story. Um, what else? We got the end of year organized play announcement, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, LSS gave us a ton of dates for next year, which is fantastic. Makes scheduling stuff super easy. You can find all those dates on fabcg.com. I'm not gonna read them all off to you,
But we
but
could if we really wanted to vamp for time, but no. All available online. Uh, LSS, if you ever watch this, Alex would really love some team events with 3 different formats. Those like mixed format events like CCLL and like a best of 3 blitz round. Kind
yeah.
of
So
sweet.
something else so it came out in the big article, like all the dates and stuff, but then they also did some changes. So there's no XP invites for Pro Tours, or I assume Worlds, since that's a top tier event like that as well.
Yeah, I would assume the same. I think each country's nationals probably remains to be seen if that is like maybe the one time of year that they let XP matter for that sort of thing. But
I
it's
think that would make
definitely
sense. But
definitely an interesting change, and I don't have the numbers in front of me because I didn't run them myself. But I've heard basically that so in addition to no more XP invites, they are also combining the ELO leaderboards into a single ELO, and top 75 on that will be getting ELO based invites to events.
so instead
Which,
of top 50 limited and top 50 constructed. it's just 75. I'm not sure how they're going to do the math to combine the ELO numbers, but that's not my job to figure out. So
We'll leave that to
something,
LSS's computer geeks. I say that
yeah.
lovingly as a fellow computer geek, for the record, not trying to take a shot at anyone. I do software development
So
for a living.
they also announced there's gonna be 18 callings in 2024, which I'm not sure exactly how many the numbers compare to 2023, but they've given us the percentages and classic constructed 50 to 60%, limited, sealed or draft 30 to 35%, and then other blitz team living legend are going to be 10 to 15%. Now, like Kevin said, I think it'd be super cool if there was a team event that was three different formats. So each player on the team played a different format. So you could do like 65-minute rounds and then do Blitz best of two CC Living Legend. And everybody on your team plays a different, obviously, the person playing the same format on the other side.
All right, my Blitz versus URL best of two.
Not sure that would work, but I
No.
think that'd be a super cool format.
Yeah, those were my favorite events to play in Magic were the team multi-format events. You'd play a standard seat, a modern seat, and a legacy seat, and just you get to play it with your friends. So it kind of obviously doing well is really nice, but team events are the best. It doesn't matter how you do as long as everyone's having fun, and it's so much easier to have fun at this game when you're just hanging with your buds and playing Flesh and Blood.
And when the person on your right wins, the person on your left loses, and then it's just three people on both sides staring at one person's hand, and it's for all the marbles in Costa Rica.
Yeah,
It's it's a good time.
that was still the wackiest, uh, almost the wackiest thing that almost happened at the Realm Rumble Team Sealed 5K. So Alex and I were on a team with our friend Jesse, and as it turned out, my match ended up being irrelevant. But we were very close to having uh, a loss to my left, a win to my right, and my game being a draw. And
And
uh,
this was in the top eight,
this was in the
so
top
there.
eight, so you can't tie. So the what would have happened apparently is that we would have been forced to replay our game like 3v3 style. So like just the middle game that drew would be replayed with no additional sideboarding, and then it would literally be three-headed 3v3 on replaying that same matchup, which would have been wild and the slowest top eight game ever. uh,
Kind of glad that didn't happen, but also kind of wish it would have, because just would have
it,
been
it
an
would
even wilder story to that weekend.
absolutely. It would have been a story for like future judge conferences too. They'd be like, hey, so by the way, this is a thing that can happen, and just in case, this is how it's handled.
Well, the judge was even standing right behind you as we were getting down to it. The judge hadn't realized that Jesse and I had both won our games, so he saw that you two were gonna draw, and was like, "Oh no, I need to go find the rule book, because how do I what do I do in this situation?" But did not come to pass.
No, no. Fortunately, we didn't have to go down that road, and everybody got to get home on time. But so now we jumped around a bit on these announcements, but I think the it's going to be interesting seeing what happens to the size of Pro Tours and Worlds with. So if you're at so I guess you can probably safely assume that there's some overlap between the top 50 constructed and top 50 limited elo board. You know, maybe not a full 25 worth, but there's probably some overlap there anyways, which might be the logic behind switching it to top 75 instead of top 100.
Yeah,
Um,
because like at the Pro Tour, obviously, if you're doing well, then you're doing well across all formats. So your elo is just going to be inflated because that modifier is so large. So like Michael Fang from the last Pro Tour, obviously is doing well in draft and constructed. So both of his numbers, I'm sure, are I guess he would be top 50 in
Right.
both.
And with no XP based invites though, like so it's probably less than 25 lost invites, but it's still like at peak, even if you had two completely different leaderboards there, 25 less invites and the loss of XP invites on top of that, that's as many as 125 less invites per event. Um, and I wonder. I fingers crossed. I hope this comes to pass. We'll see what actually happens. I wonder if the reasoning behind that is they're gonna somehow supplement it with um, either ProQuest invites that more closely resemble RTN structure, where where potentially multiple people can qualify for the event out of the same top eight. Who knows what those numbers need to look like to support that, but it's possible. Um, or even if it's not multiple people from a single top eight, but potentially like fractional invites, right? So if you
Give it
get
to him,
second
Kevin.
place, if you get second place at your ProQuest, like let's say you get like a silver invite, right, which is effectively
Yeah.
half of
The
an
theme
invite.
is the theme is already there. It's a gold invite, a silver invite, and a copper invite.
It's
So
there. It's all
one
set.
gold and you're in, two silvers, you're in, four coppers, you're in.
And
Because
then you get to cash in your invite.
yeah, every pro quest that I was able to go to this previous season, I got the top eight, and then two of them I was just one win away from qualifying, but it didn't end up happening. So like I performed consistently well at all the events that I went to, but just wasn't able to get the first place. So I ended up not qualifying for the pro tour.
Yeah, and it's tough. The way that Elo can move so violently at the at the higher level events, and ProQuest being win or bust uh, in terms of progress towards an invite. Usually, it's really it rewards spiking a single event over like consistent performance, which I know it's tough to do both with the same system potentially, but I think there's definite room for improvement. I'd be really excited to see some sort of augmented system.
Because also the elo modifier at ProQuest is not high enough. Like me doing well at all of those events, like I gained elo off of the my opponents that I ended up beating, but it wasn't enough to propel me into top top 50.
Yeah, I think the relative scale for those unfamiliar with how Elo works, it's basically a everybody starts with an arbitrary starting level of an Elo of 1500, and if two 1500 level players play each other, there is there's a number that is escaping me right now. I think it's like the K, was it the K factor,
Yeah,
or yeah, so the K factor for
it changes depending on the event that you go to. So, Road to Nationals ProQuest is 3 or 5, something like that.
mhm.
And then Callings is 32, I want to say.
Or yeah, I think
And then
Battle
Pro Tour
Harden's
Worlds is
16,
64. Yeah. So
and
it scales
8,
up the
16,
higher
32,
tier event.
64,
Yeah.
and so those 1500 players get paired against each other, and with a K factor of 8, with their levels being even, they each put four. They basically you basically wager 4 points of elo against the other player. So if you uh, win your match against an evenly matched player, you would expect to gain um, four elo points because you won your four back and you got their four. The relative amount of elo that people put in changes depending on the relative elos of players, and uh, so if you do poorly at the World Championship, you drop like a rock. And if you do really well at the World Championship, you can skyrocket to top 10 in the world relatively out of nowhere. Meanwhile, if you are a player who's just playing ProQuests and Road to Nationals and smaller rated events, you would have to have a remarkable amount of sustained success to even be able to sniff the actual leaderboard.
And if you're doing that, then you'll probably win an event
Mm-hmm.
because you basically just have to go undefeated at every event that you go to even have a chance. And I'm not sure that even gets you there in one season at least.
Yeah, definitely not in one season. And once your elo gets high enough, like if you have a really high elo, the average elo of random Joe Schmo at a ProQuest is, it might be fine. It might be a fine number, but it's probably not going to be, in the 1700s, 1800s, where those lists start landing. Um, and so every loss you get is going to be it's going to take 3 wins to make up for a loss. So you need to have a incredibly high win rate to constantly climb, especially via the smaller events. But
But anyways, off of our soapbox, Kevin and I have been talking about that gold, silver, copper invite style for far too long. Finally have a platform to present it to the world.
that's it. That's the secret reason that the IP3 exists.
Yeah, the only reason. But anyways, shall we move on to our main topic?
We shall. Uh, so jumping back to Magic a little bit, everybody knows the Power Nine, right? You got your
No,
Black
I don't.
Lotus, you got your Moxen, and several other cards that I won't bother to name because they're even more obscure to Alex than those. Um, Fab doesn't have that. Just it's not really a thing. However, a trend that we noticed with certain classes, and certain, I guess, to a further extent, certain heroes, but it sort of depends on the card and the class and the hero. Uh, there are some sets of cards in Flesh and Blood that sort of, conventional wisdom says if you want a card that's like an offensive card or a card that you want to attack with, that card should be the red copy of the red version of that card if it comes in a cycle. Why? Because you're getting the most bang for your buck. You're getting the most power for your attack. If you want something to be a resource card, you're looking at blues, right? It's something that it still has a good effect even with the lower power version of it, but it being able to pitch for 3 sort of negates the other numeric downside. Um, well, we've been looking through the 9 ofs of actually most of the classes. Some of them are unique to heroes, some are a little more unique to classes, and others are kind of unanimous regardless of which hero of the given class you might be playing. Uh, 0 to 60 uh, shout out. Um, but yeah, so we were going to take a look through, what some of these 9 ofs are, right? They are um, cards that are commonly seen. They're generically powerful in what they do. They're good on rate at all of the colors across the rainbow. Um, but we're going to go through alphabetically and take a look at what some of these cards look like and why cards get played as 9 ofs. What about them makes them worthy of being a 9 of card. So let me just.
So for the classes that I wasn't as familiar with, because I tend to stick in my silo of classes that I play, but I did go on to Fabry and check out the most popular public list that had like a ton of games played, and was able to pick out uh, a lot of the decks that a lot of people had like put time into and had like decent win rates. Had a lot of 9 of copies. So for Assassin, we're looking at like Shred. Azuri and Arachne both run Shred. Not always exactly 9 of, but it's pretty often that there are red, yellow, and blue versions.
You
And
started
then,
on my. You started on the second one. I had isolate pulled up.
oh, well, I can talk about
All good.
Isolate
All
now.
good. We're on shred. It's shred now.
All right. Shred just interacts with the assassin class exactly how you want it to. Almost every card that the assassins have has uh, an on hit, depending on how relevant it is. But Shred lets you either get around the opponent's defense or even just seeing your opponent seeing that Shred is in your deck makes them then think about it every time they go to block.
Yeah, and the floor of shred is very high, right? Shred is a non-action 3 block, which for various classes and purposes, that's very strong. Um, so the floor of shred is okay. I'll get my 3 value out of my card, trying to play defense, and the ceiling on it is it transcends the actual stat on the card, right? When somebody attacks you with a head jab for 3, you're not gonna, outside of a very advertised like razor reflex or something, outside of other circumstances, you don't throw, you know 10 block at that head jab. You put a 3 block in front of Fi's plethora of, you know rising resentments and other draconic flavored head jabs. Well, if you have a head jab that has on hit, or any arbitrary card with an on hit, uh, like, how do you play around shred, right? Like, it is possible. You can do it on rare occasions, but if you are consistently trying to play around shred, you're doing the thing where you try and play around a pummel, which the best pummel is the one that like you don't end up having to cast and you just arsenal it and save it for later. Uh, Shred messing with the opponent's defenses in the way that it does, uh, just the -4, obviously, cool. Let me negate your sink below. Uh, but the blue one for a -2, even when it's not even the damage that matters a decent amount of the time. It's the on hit that you're forcing through, right? It's um, the
Because you'll get the 2 value off of the uh, card losing the 2 defense, which means you'll get 2 more damage. But then you also would get whatever on hit you're throwing in that example. So, for example, Death Touch, which is a 1 for 6. If it hits, you get one of the disease tokens. All of a sudden, you're playing against Akatsu, for example, with Kodachis. Now, they block 6 on that, and then you go to use your blue shred, which is the resource pitch. You still get the 2 damage in, but then you also get to give them a frailty, which probably negates the Kodachis that they were going to come back with if they were willing to have a 2 card hand. Oftentimes it's Kodachi, some attack at the end. Um, and Shred just allows you to get more than 2 or 3 value off of your blue card, which is the worst version of it, right?
right, the theoretically worst version of it. I would say for shred, you probably start with blues, and whereas the reds are the least desirable because they aren't going to be as flexible as resource cards for you. But um, yeah, I can certainly imagine a deck running 9 shreds is probably a really scary thing to try and hold back. I think
And
the
so
other. Oh,
the yeah, so the other card that we look at in Assassin is Isolate, which Arachne doesn't use nearly as much, but I don't know if I've seen an Azuri list that doesn't have 9 of them. Just the fact that uh, Dominate with her attack reaction being able to switch Isolate while it still has Dominate in for a 6 power or 2 cost, usually 6 power attack like Command and Conquer, which destroys the arsenal, or Shakedown, which has its own
mhm.
disruptive effect.
uh, for those listening and not able to currently see the video, Isolate is an assassin attack action card. Cost 0, attacks for 3, 2, or 1, depending on the color, and it's a stealth attack with Dominate. It's a 3 block, but realistically, the text on the card Isolate that makes it a 9 of when no other stealth card is worth being a 9 of in Uzuri is the keyword Dominate. Um, the way timing on the combat chain and when you attack and defend works is that by the time uh, Uzuri would activate her attack reaction to swap in a different attack, isolates dominate text has already like done its damage, right? You can't just if I know that my opponent is going to isolate and switch it out for a command and conquer, that doesn't magically let me block with 2 things from hand, even though I know it's going to be a card that's not going to end up with dominate. Um, and so it's that a motif that we'll see among the cards we're going to talk about, right? Is that dominate keyword doesn't change on any of these cards, and if you're swapping them out anyways, they're all effectively identical. Um, and having consistent access to a tool like that as Uzuri is just it's very powerful, and it's a really strong way to make sure that your on hits are actually landing.
So that's the Assassins. Uh,
Next up, brutes. You want to start with shadow or non-shadow?
let's just start with the vanilla.
Okay.
So we've got Barraging Beatdown. Cost 0, and then it gives plus 4, 3, 2 to your next brute attack, unless it's defended by 2 or more non-equipment cards. Blocks 3. That's the spiel. But the reason it becomes a 9 of is 3 block once again. It can also be your resource card. For specifically Rhinar, it's something you can play out before you attack with one of your cards that discards. So it's never stuck in your hand and you're rolling the dice 50-50 on discarding randomly.
Mm-hmm.
Also, it just trades up because the red version of the card that gives plus 4, for example, let's say we're attacking with the claw, the mandible claw.
Mm-hmm.
Two resources, attacks for 3. So if I play a red barraging beatdown and then swing with that claw, uh, I'm coming in for 7. But if you defend with 2 or more equipment cards, then I'm only coming in for 3. But I've still taken 2 cards from you, so it still does the work that it's looking for. And if you don't want to block, then I just got 0 for 4 at red.
Yeah, I think the efficiency is huge. Being a good lead off of any brute aggressive turn, right? Intimidate is a uh,
Yeah, forgot it also
wildly
intimidates.
yeah has intimidate. It's arguably the most important text on the card, but uh, it's really and it's something that has transcended or been true for Rhinar from the start and is still very commonly seen today. Running 9 of these, and if you are ever playing uh, a slower plan or the the original like pitch stack Rhinar kill that you would see in the early days of Fab was pitching your barraging beatdowns all together. And so the when you come around to your second cycle, you're able to just go barraging beatdown, barraging beatdown, barraging beatdown. They have one card left, and you just swing club, right? If you've got even if you have the bad colors, even if you're playing, you know, playing three blue barraging beatdowns, you're now swinging romping club for 10, and they have one card to defend with. You basically, you'd stack the barraging beatdowns, come in with a big attack that they couldn't turn off barraging beatdowns power buff, and you would just sort of nuke them from orbit from 10 to 12 life, whatever they were at. They just couldn't block it. Um, but this is another instance where the damage buff that barraging beatdown threatens is really nice, but it being a zero cost intimidate enabler with go again, um, and a three block on top of all of that, I think is why it sees as much play as it does. And even in Levia builds, I think the blue barraging beatdown has been played there as like a late game card to force through the last couple points of damage, right? Really force the opponent's shields down and then attack. If you go blue barraging beatdown into Howl from Beyond and swing big, like that's just a ton of damage.
Speaking of Levia,
On the topic of Levia.
the card that I see most often in Levia by far is Dread Screamer. Uh, 2 cost. As an additional cost, you have to banish uh, 3 cards from your graveyard. If a 6 or more power card is banished this way, Dread Screamer gains go again. Attacks for 6, 5, 4, block 3. All this is from my memory because I didn't have the forethought to look up these cards, so we're testing my memory.
It's a good test, and so far so good. I'll make sure I fill in the blanks because I'm cheating and I have all these cards in front of me. So
We're the cheater and the one who didn't do their homework. uh, but anyways, Dread Screamer just turns on a lot of the things that Levi is looking to do. First of all, turns off Blood Debt, assuming that you discard 6. The Go Again is heavily relevant because Levi doesn't lean as much into the Intimidate or Dominate or other ways of evading
mhm.
blocking cards. So she just needs to have more damage, which one of the best follow-ups to Dread Screamer is Graveling Growl, which is a 1 cost. And if you've banished a 6 or more power card, you can play it this turn. Attacks for 7, 6, 5, blocks 3. Uh, so the fact that you are able to pitch a blue and then Dread Screamer into Graveling Growl is just a super powerful turn. Large numbers, turns off your Blood Debt, kind of just everything you're looking to do with Levia. So the more copies of Dread Screamer that enable that play line, the better.
Yeah, it's the combination of keywords, right? Levian needs go again, needs big numbers, needs to be turning off Blood Debt to not kill herself in the process of trying to kill the opponent. Um, but yeah, Dread Screamer is just the uh, it's it'll be scary if we ever get another version of a card that looks remotely similar to Dread Screamer, right? Because if when you have these cards that are 9 ofs in aggressive decks, like there's a reason for it, and uh, I think there's probably the turns that start with a red Dread Screamer can be as scary as some of the Blood Rush Bellows or Art of War turns out of Levia. Um, I think we're gonna all see pretty soon when the new KO comes out and is attacking with big numbers with Go again. It'll really dawn on everyone how how incredibly powerful just a big chunk with Go again is. Heck, that's the whole old Viscerai build with Shrill of Skullform, which we'll get into Viscerai later. But uh, yeah, critical mass of some really uh, just important effects that aren't really replaceable too, right? There's no, oh, what's the second best Dread Screamer? There just isn't one, right? I don't think
I
there's
don't remember it
another.
specifically. I thought there was something in Dust Till Dawn that was similar, but it banished out of hand instead of graveyard. Maybe I'm mistaken. I
That
don't
sounds
play that
right.
much Leviathan.
That sounds right. But you know, banishing out of hand a whole extra card to make the same play. Obviously, that sort of dramatically shifts the cost structure of that turn. But if there's ever a second Dread Screamer that like is even close to on par with this, Leviathan suddenly will be extremely terrifying.
18
Um,
of.
18 of. We'll have to do a whole new episode. Oh god, it'll take so much time. Um,
Speaking of not taking too much time, moving on, so that this episode isn't 3 hours long.
fair, fair.
So, interestingly, Guardian is one of the classes and heroes that kind of buck the trend of running specifically 9 of 1 named card, but more so they lean into a type of card, which for Guardian are the blue attacks that have 6 power and block 3. Uh, Oftentimes they don't really care what the text on it says as long as it has like the blue resource, the 6 power to fight those pesky illusionists, and then the 3 block in the bottom right. Uh,
Hmm.
there's not Guardian's not really looking to run yellow cards at all,
Yeah,
except for
I think outgrew Guardians outgrew yellow cards that aren't majestic or like remembrance type specific cases, or Starstruck, but obviously Starstruck's insane. But Guardian outgrew yellows, I think, with Everfest when we got both Thunderquake and Macho Grande in the same set.
right.
Um, because that was on the heels of Tales of Aria, which also gave us some new Guardian cards. And the reason that the stats on the Guardian cards matter so much is the Guardian hammers, either Anathos, the two-handed one, or
Titan's Fist,
Titan's Fist, the
the
one-handed
one-handed
version.
one.
They
They both
can't.
cost 3 to swing. Uh, Titan's Fist comes in for 3 or 4, depending on the cost of cards in your pitch zone, and Anothos comes in for 4 or 6, as long as there's 2 or more 3 cost or more in your pitch zone.
Right. So they just the base factors were the Guardian is a class that is predicated on consistency. So the vast majority of the deck blocks for 3. Their attacks are big and expensive, so preponderance of blues is extremely important. They need the cost of those cards to be high so that their hammers are swinging at peak efficiency when they're actually bothering to swing them. And then the 6 power matters for popping illusionists. It matters for having all of the blues in your deck be able to swing a zealous belting with go again. And like there was a time when zealous belting existed that Guardians still had to just run the yellows because there was still you know I don't remember if it was 6 or 9 blue cards like Crush the Weak, and certain things like that were blue 5 power attacks that obviously didn't meet that mark, and so they had to play the worst version, arguably worst version of Zealous Belting. That's not it anymore. I think the card pool allowed Guardians to outgrow yellow cards, and that's why we have the builds that we've seen today. Um, and there's a few other heroes and or classes that um, do a similar thing. I think you would have to see uh, a more specific like effect on a card to convince a guardian to start running yellow attacks. I think the biggest chance of that in the short term is with heavy hitters, right? We're seeing a lot being done with might tokens. For those unfamiliar, might tokens are a token that pop at the start of your turn and give your first attack that turn +1 power. So it's like a courage token, except you don't. It doesn't sit there and wait for you to attack. It pops start a turn no matter what. Uh, there is an important, I guess not important, but there's a card that exists in Flesh and Blood, and that card is called Thump. And Thump is a card that has an on-hit effect, but it only has the on-hit effect if it has a power greater than its base, right? So if you ever get a hero with this sort of effect, or who you know can produce a great quantity of might tokens or produce them very consistently, and we got another card, maybe not a clone of Thump, but like another card that cared about that same requirement being met. I think that's the type of world we'd have to see Guardians start playing more yellow cards. Uh, but that again just follows the trend of, is the effect like so unique that you just need to play every copy of it you can get your hands on.
So Guardians kind of fall out of the trend, but the Illusionist, however, Light Illusionist and Draconic Illusionist. We'll start with the Light Illusionist. The card that I see and I think should be a 9 of in every single uh, Light Illusionist deck is Wartune Herald. Like the it costing 1 is just such uh, a powerful thing
So
that it
it's
kind of just does everything that you want because Light Illusionist, you're wanting to pitch yellow cards. So if you're pitching a yellow card, paying 1 for a Wartune Herald, you've got 1 floating. If it hits, cool, it has go again. If it's blocked, cool, they just blocked 7, 6, 5, red, yellow, blue, and it has go again. Or if it gets popped by a 6 power attack, then I have my 1 floating to pay for footsteps to have it have go again. So it's kind of just the best of all the things that Prism is looking to do.
Yeah, I think Wartune Herald, just the brutal efficiency of the card carries it, right? Like I wouldn't say so the part of Wartune Herald that is unique amongst all of the other Herald options that you have in Light Illusionist, it's the cost, right? There are infinite other 2-cost heralds. They have effects, like actual effects. Wartune Herald is just face value, which again, for those listening and not watching, is a light illusionist attack action. Uh, Costs 1, comes in full suite of colors, attacks for 7/6/5. Like all the heralds, if it hits, you put it into your hero's soul, and it has phantasm, right? So it can be popped by non-illusionist attacks with 6 or more power. Um,
But also, if you're playing Prism, it has the hidden on hit of search your deck for a figment and put it into play, which is pretty relevant.
yeah, new Prism is a big fan of putting heralds into soul, so that on hit text is more potent and more relevant for new Prism than it ever was for old Prism, right? Like the old one, Soul was good. Making spectral shields was a nice resource sink, but uh, new Prism being able to tutor out figments from the deck is just an order of magnitude stronger. Um, and so while Wartune Herald isn't singularly doing anything uh, like effect wise that is unique among the heralds, uh, costing 1 versus 2 is just dramatically relevant. It's the difference between uh, you know just imagine a 2 card or a 3 card hand that's just War Tune Herald. Like imagine a hand that's just 2 reds and a yellow War Tune Herald. That's a 14 damage turn off of 3 cards, which rate
I'll
wise
raise
is
you one
crazy.
even one better. You activate Tunic to gain 1 resource, and now you've got a 1 card hand that attacks for 7 with a non-hit of all those things that we talked about earlier, which is even better.
And you didn't have to banish cards from your hand beforehand to do it, because like trust me, I play Vincent. I have 1 card sevened plenty of times. But yeah, just being able to you know play a game where you're not uh, taking an intellect penalty. Not really, but uh, taking an IP or like there's no hoop to this card. It's just raw stats, uh, and I think that is why when Brian Gottlieb is inevitably proven correct and Prism Awakener of Soul becomes a real player in the meta with the advent of new Luminaris. I think Wartune Herald is extremely likely to be a 9 of there.
Which we did talk about that weapon in the previous episode, so feel free to listen to that. But
Yeah.
moving on to the other illusionist, Draconic Illusionist, also kind of bucks the trend and leans towards Guardian, where they're not running 9 of a single copy, but the powerful thing that the Draconic Illusionist is doing is playing dragons and establishing a board state that your opponent has to either attack the dragons or attack the hero. So oftentimes Draconic Illusionists just play every single dragon that they can. Maybe not the legendary ones that are super expensive, but every single dragon that costs 0, 1, or 2, I think should probably be in every Draconic Illusionist deck, just for the mass amounts of bad decisions that you have to give your opponent. Of do I clear the board and let them have a full hand, or do I attack their hero and know that I'm going to get hit by their board the following turn as well?
Yeah, it definitely. Dromai gives the opponent a bunch of opportunities to make mistakes or to mis misevaluate the threat level of a given board state or something like that. And it's similar to the the situation with Guardian, right? Where instead of 9 ofs, instead they have okay, cool, 20 of my cards are the same thing, right? A blue block 3 6+ power card with who cares what the text on it is because it has these baseline stats. For the draconic heroes who specifically care about red cards and pitching red cards and playing red cards, uh, obviously that deck is, and particularly with the advent of Tome of Imperial Flame, those decks, it is uncommon for those decks to have any more than like 9 blues total, right? And plenty of them are going even lower than that.
Yeah.
There are versions that have literally no blues and just like a remembrance or two, but otherwise just no resource cards. The other reason that there's no 9 ofs in Dromai is these dragons aren't in aren't in cycles, right? There's no blue Chromai, which holy crap would that be absurd. Uh, but so this Dromai couldn't really run 9 ofs even if she really wanted to, and certain dragons she would certainly want to. Um, but yeah, so this one definitely more falls in outlier territory. Um, I'm trying to think if there was a Draconic Illusion, or what's the first card that if every hero was obligated to play at least one 9 of in their deck, what 9 of would Dromai cram just to get by?
If it was force, I think might be Dunebreaker Cenopai, which is a one cost, Draconic Illusionist, attack. Just has go again. If it's popped via Phantasm, because it has Phantasm, you gain an Ash. That's just 5/4/3 at red, yellow, blue. Blocks for 3. At, obviously, the red is the best version, but if we're forced to run 9 kind of just another go again attack.
Fair. Yeah, that's a good one. I think I'm between Sweeping Blow or uh, Billowing Mirage. I think, and I think I
Do
probably
those
give
as
the edge
well.
to Sweeping Blow, just because the automatic Ash generation. But
Yeah. Because if not
just
every
food for
card
thought.
in your deck is red, then you probably end up needing more Ash anyway. So that probably makes more sense.
Hmm. But
But moving on, Mechanologist.
now to the mechs.
So we're not going to go hero by hero because there's quite a few Mechanologists here at this point.
But more
But
importantly, we can tell you a card that's probably a 9 of in all of the decks. Teklevossen is probably the exception, but I think even he is probably running like 6 copies of this card. Even if it's the more controlling versions, just because he too must contend with dragons from time to time. Uh, 0 to 60. Mechanologist attack action costs 0, blocks 3, and attacks for 4, 3, or 2, depending on the color, and has boost, the bread and butter mechanologist keyword, where you can banish the top card of your deck, and as long as it's a mech card, 0 to 60 gains go again. Right? So a 0 for 4 in red with go again is fantastic. There are whole decks predicated on trying to get as many effective carbon copies of that effect as they can. Looking at Briar
Dromai.
or to Dromai, aggressive builds of Dromai, even Phi to an extent. Um, that's just a great rate for what it's doing, and it's asking so little of you. If your deck was ever going to boost or was already planning on boosting a lot, 0 to 60 asks nothing and just gives you a great costed attack. And even the lower power versions, the yellow and the blue versions, uh, they help fill your curve or be your resource card. Um, Imagine you're trying to get your max velocity turn off the ground. Um, Having a blue 0 to 60 in hand is fantastic, right? It's either it's your resource card to fuel the entire turn, or it fits right in as asking no resources of you to be that third boost attack to let you hit someone with max velocity. Um, or even in the controlling builds of, I guess the full control like turtle dash OG dash is probably not running 9 0 to 60s either, but that is a aberration among mechanologist decks because it's probably the only mech deck that isn't at least 90+% mechanologist cards.
I'm
Um,
not super familiar with the exact builds of it, but I think it might be. I mean, if it was running 9 copies of it, it wouldn't surprise me, just because it's still just doing all the things that you want.
yeah,
Just like Zipper Hit, which is basically a
this
very
this
similar
plus
thing.
one.
Yeah, it's just go ahead and go back, rewind 30 seconds, 40 seconds. Everything we said about 0 to 60, it's the same thing for Zipper Hit. It just costs 1 and is 1 more damage.
Yep.
On to the next.
Yeah. Uh, yeah. Same for both of them, right? They offer a great rate for very little, deck building or resource cost. Um, even with Zipper Hit, there are lesser versions of Zipper Hit, and even one step further in Throttle, right? The version that is a 2 cost and goes 6/5/4. Uh, there are lesser versions of both of those cards in Jumpstart and Rev Up that see play because the rate on a 1 for 5 with Go Again is fantastic. And like Red Zipper Hit is a marquee contributor to boost dash to dash IO decks just for the raw efficiency gets played in max decks. It gets played in Teklevasan decks that are boosting, or even in the side of ones that aren't. And that's a situation, especially after Bright Lights too. Bright Lights shined a light on how strong the original cycles of Mechanologist attack actions were. Uh, in that we have a strictly worse version of 0 to 60 called 0 to 50 that attacks for 3, 2, or 1. And, you know, it's
Still getting played.
still getting played certain places. Just goes to show how fantastically statted, um, 0 to 60 Zipper Hit and Throttle are. Those are cards that get played, um, can be played pretty often as 9 ofs, and in that case, it's raw stats. That's just it. The numbers on them are just great, and there aren't other cards with numbers that are better, and so you run those Mechanologist classics.
All right. Next class is Ninja. But first, we're gonna talk about Katsu because there's kind of two different ones that the two ninjas like to run.
Yeah,
Katsu runs Surging Strike. Cost two. Uh, go again. 5, 4, 3. Red, blue, yellow. Blocks two. Surging Strike is the beginning to all of Katsu's most powerful line, so you need that combo starter as much as you can get it. So I'm pretty sure every Katsu deck runs the reds and the yellows, and I think Katsu tends to get away with not running the blues because it doesn't cost 0, it doesn't turn on Kodachis, but you still need more copies, so Katsu kind of gets away with not running the blues by running Be Like Water, which is a 0 cost. Go again. If this hits, you can pay 1 and name a card, and it becomes that card. So you get a name Surging Strike, and you're off to the races.
yeah. And this example, it's more, other times it's been about a specific effect of a card, and I guess this technically falls in that same category, but obviously it's not. It's not that, Surging Strike being a 2 for 5 with Go Again, that is, you know, that's so good that I want to stack my deck with as many copies of that as you can, right? No, a yellow Surging Strike being a 2 for 4 with Go Again is stat wise strictly worse than Leg Tap being a 1 for 4 with Go Again. Uh, but with all the combo lines, it's not it's not the stats that matter; it's the name. And Surging Strike into Whelming Gustwave or Descendant Gustwave is the stuff of nightmares, particularly if you are a local of Dan Grosclose, our resident Katsu master, who has annihilated all of us many, many times with his fantastic Katsu skills. But the fact that you can, and I think the only reason that modern Katsu builds get to buck the 9 of on Surging Strike is because Be Like Water just lets you cheat, right? It's a situation where, if 0 to 60 as a 0 for 4, or 4 power 0 cost, and then the yellow 3 power 0 cost was great. If that 3 power mattered more, you could run red 0 to 50, right, to sort of like bridge that gap and keep the power at a certain level. And Be Like Water just lets you. It's just a cost upgrade over Blue Surging Strike, and honestly, it pulls. Be Like Water might be what, like, the most blocked card against Katsu. Just, even though you're like, okay, well, if this hits, they'll name Surging Strike, but you don't want to let it hit. Like, it's an interesting workaround to the I need to play 9 of this card rule for sure.
Yeah. And then for the other ninja,
Good old
it
Fi.
it yeah, it ends up being oftentimes Brand with Cinderclaw. Now, I'm not saying that every single fight deck has 9 of these, but if there are ever 9 I think this is the card that Fi runs 9 of if you're gonna end up running yellows, because it's just a 0 for 3 with go again, which is fine. Just a generic head jab, but it lets your next attack become draconic as well, which turns on your hero power, which can make Kodachi Fi into a lot of just pings of 1. And then it's just the floor on it is high
The floor on its head
compared
jab.
to, yeah, yeah.
Rhea has said in the past to me that every card is head jab to some degree. That is more literally true with Brand with Cinderclaw than figuratively. But I think there's a couple other minor factors that like for work in Brand with Cinderclaw's favor too that make the the power suboptimal versions, the yellow and blue versions, more worth playing. And you mentioned one of them, which is cool. Well, I'll lead off with Brand with Cinderclaw, and then I'll attack with my Harmonized Kodachi, which is now Draconic thanks to Brand with Cinderclaw. Uh, and when you're Fi, obviously you have a Phoenix Flame in the yard almost always. And if you hit that critical, 3 Draconic Chain Links, getting that Phoenix Flame back is free. And so
Viability.
right. So there's value just in that for the actual brand of the card, making your next card draconic. But the yellow and blue brand with Cinder Claws also trigger the Tiger Stripe Shuko, uh, which I will pull that up. Uh,
Second, the second card you play with 2 or less power uh, gets +1 and damage cannot be prevented. Get that right?
yep, absolutely. Yeah,
Nailed it.
second attack action with 2 or less base power you play each turn gets +1, and its damage can't be prevented. Blade break and 2 defense, but uh, you know the yellow brand with Cinderclaw. If that gives you a draconic chain link that is effectively 1 resource towards getting that Phoenix Flame back, and if it is triggering Tiger Stripe, the first fulfilling the first required 2 power attack action on Tiger Stripe Shuko, it's also getting you a damage for playing it, right? So playing yellow brand with Cinderclaw into Harmonized Kodachi, if you get the flame back and attack with it that turn, you played a -1 cost 3 power go again attack as a
Well, it
yellow.
just the yellow just becomes 4 value, right? Because you get the 2 from actually playing it, the 1 from Shuko on your second attack, which is probably the Phoenix Flame, which is your fourth. So you just played as yellow 0 for 4. Pretty good.
Yeah. Yep. Uh, yeah, the value there
At harder
is.
breakpoints to hit at 1 damage and 2 damage.
Mm-hmm. Um, but yeah, so in Fi, Brand with Cinderclaw, it obviously it's not technically a combo starter, but the way Fi's usual turn cycle and attack patterns tend to play out, it effectively is similar to a combo starter to a certain extent. Uh, all
All
right,
right.
now we go to one of Alex's favorites,
The Ranger,
Hello Ranger.
which we recently had Lexi Livewire, Living Legend, which makes me sad. But the card that we got out of Tales of Aria that I think should probably be a 9 of in every single Ranger deck is Bolt and Shot. So let's see. There's a lot of text on this card.
I can just read this one if you want.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So Bolt and Shot is a 0 cost Ranger attack action arrow attack. It has 3 block, 4 power in red down to 2 in blue. And while Bolt and Shot's power is greater than its base power, it has go again and on hit reload. So when Lexi was running Bolt and Shot, she had access to Voltaire Strike Twice, and had the ability, which just innately had the ability to give bolt and shot +1. So it was able to sort of double dip and effectively give it +1 and go again on bolt and shot, making it a 1 for 5, like 1 cost, 5 power go again on hit reload arrow, which is great.
The thing that oftentimes limits the whole ranger class is that your arrows are your most powerful attacks, but they must be played from arsenal, and oftentimes your bow, with the exception of Voltaire Strike Twice, can only be activated once per turn. So bolt and shot being an attack that you can play with also threatening a reload, which would let you put an arrow into your arsenal face down, or any card face down into your arsenal. Most of the time, it's going to be an arrow, so you can attack again off the go again. So the best plays off of bolt and shot are uh, lace with blood rot, for example. Any of the lace or any of the +3 buffs, lace with blood rot gives it the on hit of giving your opponent a blood rot token. But bolt and shot at red, then coming in for 3 + 4, 7. Go again. On hit reload. On hit get a blood rot pox at the breakpoint of 7 means that unless they have a defense reaction or armor, it's going to have to be 3 cards, which most people don't want to do. Uh, and then if they do end up letting it hit, or you have a reaction like Rain Razor, which gives your arrow attacks +2 for the whole turn, you can then push that on hit, reload, and shoot another arrow, which will inevitably have another on hit. So bolt and shot, just doing everything you want to do, with the addition of the lace cards or seek and destroy that add on hits to arrows that you're already shooting, or else bolt and shot would kind of just be a vanilla arrow that people wouldn't mind not blocking. But
I
now
remember
that it's
those
got
days.
mul-
You used to
multiple on
play
hits,
pre Outsiders Lexi and Bolt and Shot. Oh, that's just 5 go again. Sure, it's damage. I'll wait for something that matters, like Chilling Ace Fane.
yeah. But now it matters at a break point, and also like lets you break the rule of 1 arrow per turn.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it. Look no further than Lexi and Azalea, like the way they play out between Voltaire and Death Dealer, and also we got to talk about good old Riptide as well, because I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure Bolt and Shot is a 9 of in Riptide as well.
I
Uh,
hope so.
yeah, and they all play. Each of those Rangers play a fairly different game plan from one another. Lexi is inherently trying to go more wide. Azalea is trying to go very tall, although the threat of being able to sidestep that via bolt and shot and attack 2 arrows per turn is really huge. And Riptide wants nothing more than to, play one of those 0 for 3 buffs from hand, load a bolt and shot, fire it off for 7, go again, potentially loading something else in for free, and following it up the same way.
And
Uh,
the best thing is when you play a bolt shot with go again and reload off of Riptide's ability, being able to put the arrow in without using your bow. Now your opponent's in a bad situation where if they let the bolt shot hit, I get to reload and put anything I want in my arsenal. Or if they don't let it hit and use cards to block it, then I can just use my once per turn bow and load another attack anyways.
yeah, very damned if you do, damned if you don't. But yeah, I think Bolton's shot so far of all the cards we talked about, I think is the best 9 of, like the one that's. I think it's the first one where like this card is a almost non-negotiable 9 of in every hero in the class that you can play it in. And I don't think anything we've talked about so far comes close. Like 0 to 60 is probably like second most prior to this one, but Bolton Shot is just it does everything that any ranger wants it to do. Any ranger currently existing wants it to do, and that just it shows in play rate. Um,
Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
Rangers
Moving
are
on.
great. They're just rune blades in disguise. Speaking of rune blades, uh, my bread and butter, Mavrian Skies. Uh, I think Mauve Skies is probably it's close. It's not quite on Bolton Shot's level in 9 of status, but Mavrian Skies sees extensive play in both Viscerai and Vincent. So Mauve Skies reads, it's a 0 cost, non-attack Runeblade action, a 2 block, and the text on it is, the next Runeblade attack action card you play this turn gains Go Again, and if it hits, create 3, 2, or 1 rune chance depending on the color. So the interesting part about, or somewhat similar to Shred that we had already talked about, Mauve Skies was originally an inclusion just as a good value blue for the deck. Being able to get Go Again when you needed it was really nice value. Um, but the thing that really vaulted Mauve Skies up to not 9 of status for Viscerai originally was the advent of Everfest, and uh, Everfest gave us um, Shrill of Skullform, I believe, or am I thinking Dynasty? I might be getting those confused. Oh, now I'm kicking myself. I'm not ready for my
Not
own Runeblade
not
TED
to
talk.
not to be rude, Kevin. We got a couple more to go through. I don't think we need I don't think we need the history of Maverick Skies. I think we just need to know like why each Room Blade wants it specifically as of right now.
That's fair. That's fair. Uh, the reason that Mob Skies ended up in 9 of status is uh, I would say largely predicated on the weapons that Runeblades have had access to in the past. Um, Nebula Blade gets a buff if you've played a non-attack action this turn. Um, Rosetta Thorn is sort of the real bread and butter that is where Maverian Skies made its name known. Uh, and when you look at like Viscerai's ability and turning on the Rosetta Thorn effect of adding 2 arcane damage to that swing, on top of giving your first Runeblade attack action an on hit that's just threatening more damage, you're also turning on that weapon, turning on that Viscerai passive. So even if the Mavrian Skies attack gets fully blocked out, you're still getting to use your floating one resource to do an extra 4 or 5 damage on that turn. Um, and Mavrian Skies uh, is similar to Shred or Isolate in that obviously the threat of making rune chance is nice and is valuable, but it's the Go Again that is the power of the card, and every version gives Go Again just as well as each other, and that's why it gets played as a 9F because there's not really your other options for Go Again enablers are, Lead the Charge, which might get played in blue, or Captain's Call might get played in as a yellow in a one-cost version of a deck. But there's not that many other Go Again enablers that uh, you know work with the way Runeblade tends to play out.
Of all the
Um,
options, Maverick Skies is the best.
clear best. And Vincent loves it too. That threat of on hit is extremely powerful. Um, yeah, that's it. No more history lesson.
I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just know this is going along with a couple more to do. Uh, so on to Warriors. Um, Dorinthia and Bolton kind of have two different cards. Uh, and Dorinthia has a lot of different builds with the different weapons, but it's of my opinion that Warriors Valor should probably be a 9 of in all the Dorinthia decks. It just is just like we've been talking about this whole time. It kind of just does everything what the class is wanting to do. Cost 1 gives a buff 3/2/1 to your next weapon attack, and if that weapon attack hits, it gains Go Again, block 3. Uh, so obviously, famously with Dawnblade, you pitch blue, Warrior's Valor, Dawnblade, 6. If it hits, go again. Obviously, Dorinthia has the reactions to do shenanigans around that. But just uh, what's uh, what's the word I'm looking for here? Let's just complete brain fart. All the same ability, just of like threatening go again and a buff is just what Dorinthia is looking for.
Right. And I think the fact that, you know, so the go again that it grants is conditional. So it is a card that incentivizes your opponent to try and you dare your opponent to try and stop this Warrior's Valor from hitting. And that is just playing into Dory's game plan with her multitude of attack reaction options to blow you out and go over the top of your blocks. Uh, Honorable mention uh, to run through, I think. That card is extremely powerful. Uh, and we'll just be on it super quickly. The reason it's not a 9 of, an actual 9 of, is because it currently only exists in yellow, because it came in the uh, Dorinthia versus Rhinar uh, dual deck that they released. But if we ever, so we're getting a new Kasai. Centauri Sabers are coming back. Uh, and there's a world where, run through is just a card that exists in heavy hitters. And if you have a dual wielding warrior out there wielding these one cost swords, run through, much like Blade Runner, just fits perfectly on this cost curve. And uh, yeah, I think that is a card with very high future 9 of potential if we ever get it printed out the rest of the way. Um, but
Moving
over to
on
Bolton.
to yeah, onto Bolton, the light warrior. I'm gonna go off. I'm gonna go beating bravado first, Kevin.
Ah, juked me out. Okay.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Uh, so Bolton is also kind of skirts the line of not really doing this because he specifically wants yellows. Because a lot of the cards we got out of Dust Till Dawn say if you charge a yellow, it gets a specific effect. For example, Beaming Bravado. Costing 0, as a just cost, you may charge your hero's soul. If a yellow is charged this way, Beam Bravado gets +1. And its base is 3, 2, 1, block 3, attack action. So Beaming Bravado, being able to buff itself, assuming that you're charging a yellow card, means that it just turns on Bolton's ability with no interaction from the opponent. Because oftentimes when you charge, you have to hope that your opponent blocks with an attack action to trigger Bolton's ability, which is if you've charged, whenever the opponent defends with an attack action card, attack gets +1 power. But Beam Bravado, just not interacting with the opponent, means that Bolton can have effective 2-card hands. Like a yellow and a Beam Bravado turns into 4. Bolton's ability gives it go again into Raid and Swing for 3 more. That's a 2-card 7. That's what that's what the show is looking for. However, he doesn't. I don't think unless you're. I like to run Raiden, so like a zero cost pitch deck with some exceptions. Take flight and via the Vanguard, which you can look those cards up on your own. But um, the blues just don't quite do enough because if you're doing blue, charging a yellow, now it's coming in for 2, and then raid and swing for 3. That's a 2-card 5. That's not what we're looking for. The yellow one is okay because it's still a 2-card 6. Um,
Yeah, it's a situation where so before Dusk Till Dawn came out with a little bit of extra juice for Bolton, you could largely a reason that Bolton struggled is because, oh, my opponent charged a Bolt of Courage, threatening to draw a card. It's I can just say, okay, you hit me for 3, you draw a card, you get your arsenal, but I'm not gonna allow you to give your lead off attack go again. And Beaming Bravado just gives you a easy 6 of, sometimes 9 of, depending on your build, of a card that says no, I'm going to use Bolton to give go again, regardless of if you decide to interact with me or not. Lets Bolton keep more agency on his side of the equation, which is hugely valuable and is why Beaming Bravado is easily a 6 of and sometimes a 9 of in Bolton. Um,
The other card that is a 6 of, sometimes a 9 of, is Bolt of Courage, which, as Kevin just described, if you've charged this turn, it gains on hit, draw a card, which is pretty great. Just
it's
a
pretty great.
a snatch -1 power. I would still run that, and it blocks for 3. Super powerful with like the combo of Via the Vanguard, which depending on how many cards you charge on Via the Vanguard, buffs your all of your attacks that turn. So you can all of a sudden be coming in for a Bolt of Courage for 4 or 5, threatening to draw a card. And it being buffed from Via the Vanguard then lets you give it go again, regardless of what your opponent does. So it's
Yeah,
all upside.
yeah, and just ask the Dromai players who run Snatch and Kyloria. More copies of Snatch is more better. That's I don't make the rules. That's just how it works. Turns out drawing cards in trading card games is really strong. So
Turns
uh,
out.
yeah, and honestly, Bolton would potentially run more blues than he does if it wasn't for the advent of the I care about charging yellows specifically, right? It gives you this separate deck building incentive that you need to work to contort your build to, and it will reward you for it. But that's why there's not really um,
Also, with the lack of frostbites in the meta currently,
also
it
that.
makes it so that I don't have to run blue cards because wizards aren't real.
No, 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 no. Just top eighting everything at the Rumble. But shh.
Speaking of
Speaking
wizards,
of,
uh, the most recent battle hardened that, at least in the United States, I apologize, I cannot remember the name of the player that won, but their Kano deck had 9 Aether Spindle.
Julian? Was it Julian? I
It
think
very
it's
well could be.
Julian. Congrats on your battle hardened win, Julian.
Apologies. But Aether Spindle. Go ahead and read this one.
Yeah, yeah, all right. I
I,
won't
I
fight
know
you
what
too
I
soon.
know
Aether
what it
Spindle,
does in my brain, but
2 cost, wizard action. It's a 3 block. Its text is deal 4 arcane damage to target opposing hero, 3 or 2 in yellow and blue. And then Opt X, where X is the damage dealt by Aether Spindle.
yeah. So this is a card I think ends up getting sideboarded depending on matchups. So Aether Spindle, you run 9 of copies when you're against an aggro deck that's not going to want to pitch, not going to run a lot of AB, so that you can dig through your deck with opting and get to your Wildfire, Blazing power cards that stack damage multiplicatively. Um, and then I think in slower matches like Bravo, for example, where they run a ton of blues, going to run Arcane Barrier 3 or 4, you might even still run the blues and the reds just because it's a threat that they need to block to avoid you from setting up a devastating pitch stack.
Yeah, agreed. And I think this is one of the most generous, I guess, 9 of decisions we made, right? I don't know that I've ever actually seen someone play a yellow Aether Spindle against me. I think
If
it's
Julian was his name, I know that like they commented during the coverage that there were 9 copies in
oh okay
the
yeah
deck.
there you go.
So
Shows what I know. I am not a Kano player at all. So I just will choose to believe you. Uh, but no, it makes sense. The logic behind what you're saying makes sense, and why it's good into low AB matchups, um, and also potentially solid into high AB matchups as a way to draw out arcane defense proactively before you try and do your pop off turn.
And for the Elemental Wizard, which currently living legend, but give her a quick shout out. Aether Ice Vein. The Is it the most annoying card in Fab? You just see it hit the table and you just big sigh.
I, you know, I think Aether Ice Vein is okay until there's an Insidious Chill on the board. That's when it starts to feel egregious. Uh, but Aether Ice Vein, Elemental Wizard action costs 3, blocks 3, Ice Fusion, so you can reveal an ice card from hand when you play it to get an extra effect. Deals 5, 4, or 3 arcane damage, and if fused, and if it deals damage to a hero, they discard a card unless they pay 2 resources. So this card is both aggressive and disruptive, uh, and the
And
fact that
Insidious Chill is just a ore that sticks on the board, and whenever you ice fuse, like you would to trigger the Ice Vein effect, it just makes you also discard a card or pay 2 resources. So it kind of just
right, so
stacks.
yeah, so you stacked those effects at the same time, and it was just causing all sorts of headaches for your opponent. But normally I would say for this Aether Ice Vein, because from a defensive standpoint, uh, a arcane 4 points of arcane is a really good breakpoint because that means your opponent is pitching 2 cards to stop what you're doing. They probably would have stopped at red and yellow Aether Ice Veins in a lot of cases, but because Icelander lets you play blue Aether Ice Vein at instant speed on the opponent's turn, I think that sort of uh, you know let it make the cut in a lot of instances where you know if you were a sorcery speed wizard and not consistently cheating action points the way Icelander was able to, I don't think Aether Ice Vein really does it because you can just negate. You're paying 3 and spending a card, and your opponent can pitch a single blue and just negate what you did. It was the surprise factor that kept Aether Ice Vein as a 9 of in the arcane heavy Icelander lists that Rhea was famous for playing. So, um, yeah, unfortunately, not seeing any more Aether Ice Veins for a while. Or fortunately, depending on who you are. If you're a Bolton enthusiast, you do not miss this card in the slightest. I'm deeply, deeply confident. Um, but yeah, that brings us to uh, the end of the class examination. Uh, we do have one other super brief one to shout out because there are a few other 9 ofs that have existed in Fab that sadly are no longer with us, somewhat similar to Aether Ice Vein. We're talking
Sadly
about
for
nine
who?
ofs, right? These 9 ofs were so 9 ofable that they were removed from the game for being too powerful. And we will start off with my boy here, Seeds of Agony, right? Chain, the original Fab Boogeyman, uh, ran Seeds of Agony as a no questions asked 9 of. Um, you know, Card for card, Seeds of Agony is really below rate. Um, I've not ever seen it in a Vinzet list. It just, spending a whole card for a single ping of arcane damage just isn't worth. It's not worth it. It's not worth spending a whole card to do that. But Chain saw a million extra cards per turn once the shackles were up, and in conjunction with effects like Riftbind, that suddenly the Seeds of Agony represented, 3 or 4 points of damage, and when you're on 8 shackles, you could build
Because
them up.
Riftbind got a buff for each non-attack action that had been played that turn.
Yes, thank you.
So
Yes. So
If you were able to stack up 9 Seeds of Agony, all of a sudden that's 9 arcane damage, but then also 9
9 on your first
damage
Riftbind and 9 more on your second Riftbind because you have Go again because you're Chain. So it made stacking up a 30 plus damage turn in Chain too trivial because it was just free. It costing 0 was enormous for a deck that had gratuitous quantities of card advantage. And so Seeds of Agony was the first effectively suspended card, I believe. It was banned at the time, but then at some point later they instituted suspensions, which now are gone again, and it's just bans, and they'll just tell you when something's going to get unbanned. Uh, Seems like a slightly unnecessary distinction, but also doesn't really matter because it's the same thing. Uh,
Speaking of cards that shouldn't have costed 0.
Speaking of cards that shouldn't have costed 0, uh, hello Plunder Run, also a chain card. Uh, More egregiously, though, a Cheerios Briar card. Um, Plunder Run is a generic action. It is a 0 cost. The next time an attack action card you control hits this turn, draw a card. If it is played from Arsenal, the next attack card you play this turn gains +3. So Plunder Run is just exceedingly efficient, and with a preponderance of go again effects in the old Cheerios Briar deck, featuring our last and final 9 of card that comes right after this. Plunder Run effectively was 3 damage. It was the threat of card draw across every attack that you played on that turn, every attack action you played on that turn, and it was half of an embodiment of lightning, which is also it was just half a go again, which further enabled you to attack wide and threaten to draw your card off of your plunder run. So you know the frequency with which during the Cheerios Briar era I was attacked with a snatch for 10 with go again that was threatening to draw like 2 cards was far too high for a 3 card play, and the opponent still had 2 more cards they could use already. Um, Plunder Run only gets more egregious when you factor in new cards like Spellbound Creepers into the mix to be able to surprise your opponent with a Plunder Run to all but guarantee that you get to draw. Um, but it is for good reason that Plunder Run is no longer with us. And if you don't believe me, look no further than Premeditate and how effective that card's been played in both Lexi and Azalea. And it's just drawing cards is great. And Plunder Run was the OG and did it the best. Uh, and finally, our last 9 of also banned from the game. We have Ball Lightning. Lightning attack action, 0 cost, 3 power, 0 defense. Not a no block, but 0 defense. Um, when a
Nice middle
lightning,
finger to Brutes and Barraging Beatdown.
yeah, I still think that's sad. They should, like you can give them cards that don't have defensive value, but like let them be 0 defense. Why are they no blocks or non blocks? Excuse me. This is a
Another
no
topic
block.
for
Those are
another
non
day.
blocks. Uh, So Ball Lightning is whenever a lightning or elemental action card would deal damage to this combat chain, instead it deals that much damage +1. Right? So you have some weird multiplicative damage stacking potential because these decks would run 9 copies of Ball Lightning. And if I played Ball Lightning, Ball Lightning, Ball Lightning, and the third Ball Lightning hit you, you would take 6 damage. This math only gets more complex when you factor in uh, additional pings of damage from an attack. Sting of Sorcery was particularly gross when Ball Lightning was still legal because the way Ball Lightning interacts with arcane damage is disgusting and lets you increase the damage before your opponent gets to Arcane Barrier it. So that same Ball Lightning, Ball Lightning, Ball Lightning play, if you played Sting of Sorcery beforehand, the first Ball Lightning would
Which
do.
gives every attack
Oh,
that you
sorry,
play
yes.
this turn a ping of 1 arcane.
Yeah. So normally underwhelming, and only like at rate if you attacked 3 times and you got 3 pings from the Sting of Sorcery. But with Ball Lightning, if you let off with Sting of Sorcery, the first ball lightning would ping for 2 arcane, and then ball lightning hits for, is attacking for 3, but if it hits is 4. So it turns your next card into a 6 damage. The second ball lightning sees both the previous ball lightning and its own damage augmentation. So the second ball lightning deals 3 arcane, and then uh, if it's still attacking for 3, but if it hits, is going to deal 5 damage. And the third one is going to ping for 4 arcane, and if it hits, it's going to hit for 6 damage. So got out of hand very quickly, and basically in the later stages of Cheerios Briar, before Ball Lightning and Plunder Run uh, were banned jointly, um, that was how they would beat decks that were trying to fatigue them. Is okay, well, fine, you're gonna block out my deck of a pile of regular attacks. Well, I'm gonna pitch stack, this Sting of Sorcery and 4 Ball Lightnings, and we'll see how you like this in 15 turns when we get to my second cycle.
And if all that math was confusing for you, it was for the rest of the community as well, which I swear they banned it just because judges begged them to.
Yeah,
Because the amount of judge calls, Ball Lightning probably equaled all the other judge calls for the day, if I had to guess.
yeah, and I don't remember exactly. Like Ball Lightning might have existed before we had the full comprehensive rule set rolled out too. Like I think that might have been, or like maybe we were dealing with an early draft or something. But like it wasn't. It what I don't think it was initially perfectly clear how it worked, and it came down to how replacement effects get layered. And if I'm attacking with Ball Lightning and Alex is trying to Arcane Barrier the ping from Sting of Sorcery, as the active player, I get to choose to have my replacement effect occur first. So I can make the arcane amount be 2 before Alex gets to try and Arcane Barrier it. Which is
Yeah.
weird because it feels like if you AB1, you wouldn't get hit for 2 damage, but that's just not how it works in the rules.
Luckily, none of this matters anymore because it's gone.
Totally irrelevant. We
So
are.
we've run through all the classes and the cards that they oftentimes or most times or should be running 9 ofs. So now the question after all this is why? So it top players tend to value consistency over being dynamic, which is also important to be able to adapt. But players need their own deck to have its own game plan, play out, and function. And then once you've got that in place, you can add cards for specific problematic matchups or to increase your win rate in other areas.
Yeah, and to say when you say value consistency, you know the when I almost went on my history of Runeblade tour earlier, Mav's guys like got juiced when Shrill of Skullform hit the scene, and because it in conjunction with Rosetta Thorn made a really good 3 card hand. You go Mob Skies, Shrill of Skullform, pitch a single blue, follow up with Rosetta Thorn for a rune chant and 4 total damage, right? So you could attack for several breakpoints, go pretty wide, and threaten an on hit off of a 3 card hand. So running 9 Mob Skies, 9 Shrill of Skullform let you you know maximize the frequency with which you'd get to play out that bread and butter 3 card hand. And so that's why same with Bolt and Shot, right? The plays we were talking about earlier that are enabled by Bolt and Shot's unique set of effects. Um, you just get access to that as frequently as you possibly can by running 9 copies.
So in Fab, just like most other card games, the ratios in your deck are very important. Your resource card count, your power card count, and also with this podcast, the staple card count can really affect how you play each turn. If you draw a hand of all your staple cards, It's like, okay, well, some of those are resource cards because that's just the way we built the deck. We've got 9 copies. So like that hand is still functionable. If they're all power cards, it's probably a little less functional, but you could set up like get an arsenal, maybe play out one of them and hold the other one for later. Uh, and then if they're all resource cards, hopefully some of them are also your staple cards. Like for example, Warrior's Valor and Dorinthia. If you draw all 3 blue Warrior's Valor in the same hand, like that's still a threatening turn considering it's blues. You're threatening a breakpoint, threatening go again, and a counter, assuming they're not doing any blocking. So that's the reason to have staple cards is they kind of do everything you want, and no matter what the hand looks like, you'll have a functional turn.
Yeah, agreed. Uh, and I think it's, when I think about what my Viscerai decks looked like back in the day when I was running Arcanite Ascendancy and Skeleton was still legal. Uh, the weapon choices were what we have now, which is Nebula Blade and Reaping Blade, and you know, there wasn't an attack or a set of attacks good enough to make you want to lean into, you know, uh, Mob Skies, into Spellblade Assault, into Reaping Blade is a lot less scary looking than the Shrill of Skullform or Zeta Thorn counterpart. And so, because you didn't have a bread and butter consistency plan that was, you know, that efficient, you had to go for like bigger explosive turns. You had to try and, you know, take off turns, take setup turns, and you know, when you don't have that consistency, you have to play towards your power spikes or the inconsistent but far above rate turns.
The last thing we'll cover in today's long podcast, but I do think it's informative.
Mm-hmm.
So why run a 3 of a card versus a 2 of a card versus a 1 of a card in the deck? I know everybody's gone on February or whatever deck builder you use and seen why is this person running this 1 copy of Razor Reflex, for example. So staple cards and power cards usually you run 3 copies of because power cards you want like the most of them in your deck so you can have powerful turns. Staples you want 9 copies because of all the things we've talked about in this episode, and then 2 ofs tend to be tech cards. It's like, oh, I want this for the specific matchup, but I don't ever want to see 2 of them in the same hand. So I'm only going to run 2 of them so that hopefully I can sit in Arsenal, wait for the right time. But they're not going to clog up my hand and prevent my game plan from functioning. Versus 1 of cards, which is possible that they're restricted, like legendary cards, for example, Gorganian Tome, which you can only have 1 in the deck. Um, but also, you can end up running 1 ofs for fun little mind games. For example, Razor Reflex in our good buddy Dan's Katsu deck. For players who don't play against him often, they see the first one, and then if he sees it early, they expect to see more later, so they end up playing around it. It's bad for them. And then if he ends up seeing it late, now they are looking through his graveyard. Oh, this person must not run Razor Reflex, and then they die to it. Uh, it's a similar thing with Pummel. You can run 1 ofs or a couple more. And then another reason that you could run 1 of cards is if your hero has access to a tutor card. So you can kind of just have the 1 of in your deck for a specific situation, and then you get to tutor or go find the card that specific card exactly when you need it.
Yeah, I think the most common version of that I've seen in Fab, I think, is probably Viserai with a singleton copy of Read the Runes, depending on if you're going first or not. Uh, so you don't necessarily want to load your deck, full of, okay, well, 3 of Read the Runes if you're playing a more aggressive version. But with 3 copies of Become the Arc Knight in your deck, uh, on that turn 0, when you're like, well, let's, how can I set up as well as I possibly can on this turn zero? You have 4 effective copies of that with Become the Arc Knight. At least in theory. Obviously, you need to have the correct card type to discard, but it just gives you more effective access to it. Um, I'd expect to see a similar phenomenon with the new Sonata Galaxia. It's another Runeblade tutor card, and I think you'll see some, you know, there will be 3 ofs, which is probably Runeblade Incantation, and you'll probably see a handful of 1 ofs in terms of other tutor targets for it that you don't want all the time, but having the option and effective multiple copies without actually having to run multiple copies is really effective. Um, well, all right.
All I got. That's all I got.
I think that just about wraps us up for FaBs Power 9 ofs. Uh, Thanks for hanging out for this episode. We will be back again in another couple of weeks with a new episode. If you haven't, hop on Twitter and follow us at IP3 FabCast. It's here on the stream layout. It's also on our channel. If you haven't yet, go ahead and if you're enjoying the nonsense that we talk about on here, go ahead and give us a follow on the YouTube channel.
Like,
That'd be great.
comment, subscribe,
All
the whole
Yeah,
YouTuber thing. Yeah.
ring the bell even. You don't have to ring the bell. I don't do that either. But uh, yeah, thanks for hanging out with us. Hoping to keep this going well into the new year. And yeah, we'll be back in another couple weeks, probably to talk a little more about heavy hitters, and we'll talk limited formats here in about a month when we have the full spoiler. So hope you're all looking forward to that. But thanks for hanging out with us in the meantime. And as usual, this is the IP3 signing off. See ya.